Welcome to Around the Towns. I'm your host, Dan Murphy, and this episode I interviewed Stuart Swiny, the curator of the Sawin Museum.
This museum here, the so-called Sawin Museum, is named after a farmer who was kind enough to donate this plot of land that the museum is set on for the purpose of building a museum. So Mr. Sawin, Ben Sawin, was responsible for having it built.
Hi, I'm here with Stuart Swiny of the Sawin Museum in Dover, so why don't you introduce yourself, really?
Well, all right. I came to this position by chance. My predecessor decided to move on, and I just retired. I retired from my teaching position at the University of Albany, teaching art and archaeology of the ancient Near East, last May. So, of course, that gave me a lot more time to come and live at home, which is here in Dover. I married Lena Wild, now Swiny, who's one of the local inhabitants of the village. She was born and bred here. And we were married in 1970, at which time I had a fellowship in Iran at the British Institute of Persian Studies in Tehran. And we went straight out there so I could fulfill my obligations to the center, and we spent a year together in Iran, a wonderful country, very interesting. This was before the fall of the Shah. Next, that led to me being appointed as the assistant director of a newly founded British Institute again in Afghanistan, which I set up and ran for 2 years, 72 to 74. So we were in Afghanistan the last good days or last good months of that country. We were there when the king was overthrown, when a usurper, a member of his family, came in to take over. And that was the beginning of the end of instability. But before that, it was a remarkable place. What was I doing there? We were doing archaeology. We excavated a big site in the town, which is infamously or sadly famous today, Kandahar, one of the centers of the Taliban. There was a big site there established by Alexander the Great, or by his descendants, and we were investigating that site. Also, we did survey work and traveled around the country. Well, it didn't seem like the ideal place to bring up children, so we decided we would move back to a place, to a country where my wife had been working, and I had done some work to the island of Cyprus in the eastern Mediterranean, where she had first gone to work on a shipwreck of the time of Alexander the Great, so a shipwreck dating to around 300 BC. Or a little later, which has sunk off the north coast of the island and was remarkably well preserved. And she was the architect responsible for planning it and making sure that it was brought up to the surface to be preserved in an organized manner. So she had left that to come and work with me in the Near East, and then we went back to Cyprus in what was it? It was May of 1974. Literally 3 weeks before that country blew up, and before there was a coup ousting the illegitimate leader, which led to an invasion by Turkey. So in 1 year, we'd been through 2 coups and 1 war. It was a busy time for us in the mid-70s. Anyhow, we survived that, and I decided I wanted to do a PhD on the Cypriot topic on the Bronze Age. Also, I should add, and very importantly, my wife was expecting a child, and so she came back here to have it when I joined her. Then we all moved back to Cyprus, where we lived for about 25 years. I wrote my PhD there and then got a job as directing this time an American research center, the Cyprus American Archaeological Research Institute, which I established. It was really nothing when I took it over. Managed to raise funds to buy a building, or actually to get first a major library, which then we needed space for a building. We bought an old house, and it's one of the major foreign, American, British, French, or Italian research centers in the Eastern Mediterranean today. So we had a really interesting time there, but I felt that I had done what I could and was offered a job teaching at the University of Albany. Granted, it's 168 miles away from where I live, but when you get offered a good job and you can teach exactly what you want to, which for me was ancient Cyprus in the Near East, you're not about to turn it down. So I did that for 18 and a half years, retiring just last May. And the society which I had been involved with, the Dover Historical Society, which I had been involved with some 11 or 12 years ago, when we found a barn which was about to be pulled down, an 18th century barn which was contemporary with one of the oldest houses in the village, the so-called Carroll Parsonage, where the first minister of Dover lived. And it's just down the road from here, slightly less than a mile on Dedham Street. So I'd been involved with the society then. Once I retired, they said, would you like to come back and be involved again? And why not? I've got a lot to do. I've got several books I need to publish, excavation reports. Typical of archaeologists, we dig, and then it takes us years to publish. It's a lot of work, not just ours, but with colleagues. In my case, there are about 12 or 13 people involved in this book. The first volume was the size of a brick, in fact, about that thick, like a large Bible. That took me 10 years to do. The second volume will probably be just as big. So that's, in a nutshell, my history prior to coming here.
I think that I should ask this before I forget. Maybe you should talk about a little bit about the structure of the Dover Historical Society.
Yes. Well, the society was founded towards the very end of the 19th century, and in its mission statement is to collect and preserve and display finds, objects, artifacts from the town of Dover that belonged to Doverites. So this is the Dover Historical Society membership card or subscription, and you can see there are various categories. A family is $65, a friend $35. And that is really our main source of support. The members, most of whom come from Dover, but some of them are from outside Dover. The society publishes a newsletter several times a year, Dover Tidings, where there's usually something from the president, and then there are items of interest. In this case, a new research had been done on the date of the Carroll House, a new birth date for the Carroll House. This was done through tree ring analysis, studies of the wood which had been used for some of the beams. And I think then, the usually articles on different items, agricultural implements and tools. Now, the society took this building over in 1906, and if we look over there, Dover Historical Society in 1906, written on the door of a massive safe, which was part of the original construction. You could live in that safe. It's big enough. So they obviously anticipated they'd have objects of intrinsic value to keep in the safe, and there are some important pieces. Though probably the most important single item in the collection is this painting by Gilbert Stuart on the wall, which may be visible in your screen. Gilbert Stuart, a well-known late 18th and early 19th century painter, not as well known as Sargent, needless to say, but certainly an artist of repute. And I wish I remembered. I don't remember the details of the significance of this man. He was involved with the War of Independence, and was a figure of importance. He was the colonel, but I'm afraid I should, but I don't know more about him. And so we have that. We have that proudly on display. So in this building here, we have a range of artifacts from different periods, going from Native American right up to the 20th century, arranged in 3 floors. In the basement, a lot of utilitarian, also kitchen utensils are on display. This floor, as we can see, there are cases showing the history of Dover, and likewise on the top floor, the same. But we have other premises as well. Down the road was the Carroll House, which I mentioned, which was built late 18th century, around 1776, where the first parson and his wife lived, and it stayed in the family for a long time. And it too is a very important structure. It doesn't belong to the Historical Society. This building does, thus we're responsible for it. The Carroll House belongs to the town of Dover, but we curate it. The Historical Society looks after it. So when repairs are needed to the Carroll House, the town of Dover pays for them, which is important because it's an old wooden house and needs a lot of repairs. This structure here needs looking after, of course, but it's brick and it's more recent. The Carroll House is some 230, 240 years old now. Next to the Carroll House is the barn, the so-called Fisher Barn, which has a good collection of farming implements for working the land, for woodworking, for felling trees and timber, etc., in this barn, which stood in another part of Dover, was dismantled in the 1990s and rebuilt on next to the Carroll House. So these are the main the buildings we possess or curate. Dover's very lucky that we have this range of structures and an active society, which is very involved with a lot of volunteer help that enables us to run it. None of us are paid, of course, for what we do.
You had mentioned that this building was obtained by the society in 1906, but what was kind of the history of its building? Had it been built much before then, or around the same time?
It was specifically constructed to be as the museum to house the possessions of the Dover Historical Society. I must mention there are a number of books on the history of Dover that are around. Frank Smith wrote the history of Dover. There was also a very entertaining little book on folk tales concerning Dover. And I think Alice Jones, it published in 1906, the first edition, and it's been reprinted. Anyhow, she talks about Ben Sawin, who's the man who had this museum built, being very good at killing pigs. He was the prime pig killer, and he would go around the various farms, slaughter the pigs, burn off the bristles, and then let the farmers do the actual butchering themselves. But it's one of the things he's reputed to be very good at. I found that an amusing detail.
So obviously you're British, and a lot of your history suggests that you have an interest in ancient European and ancient Middle Eastern cultures, but sort of what brought you to sort of the American cultures?
Well, yes, because I married an American, so that's the first step. And if you're an archaeologist or a historian, you want to learn more about the environment in which you live. And my home is in Dover, and has been, non-stop for the last almost 20 years now. And I'm interested in how the place ticks, how it started ticking, and how it's still ticking. And I'm very interested, and I can look out of a window there and see white pines, also red oaks. I think there's an ash just to the side. If I see trees, I want to know what they are. I mean, that's sort of part of being an archaeologist. Or see a rock, I want to know what the rock is, whether it's granite, bluestone, feldspar, or whatever. We like to know what we're looking at about nature. I've become interested, and I'm getting increasingly interested in the history of Dover and the artifacts. Just late last year, I did, by the way, for one of the local schools here, I dressed up a bit as an archaeologist and went to talk to some of the 7th graders or so, sort of 8th graders, about what it was like being an archaeologist working with a trowel, and that not all of us were Indiana Joneses. As you can see from these arrowheads and the photographs, these are finds belonging to the Native Americans. That's the Indians, the original inhabitants here. Nothing particularly spectacular there. Utilitarian objects made out of chipstone, arrowheads, and one or two maybe small spear points. And they, of course, occupied this landscape. It was wooded then, but it would be wrong to believe that that it was very heavily wooded. They liked to burn the undergrowth so they could see the game hunt more efficiently. So you can see these baskets. There's an interesting and really rather poignant story attached to them. They were made in the earlier years, the first quarter of the 19th century, so the 1820s up through 1840s, by the Native Americans, the natives in particular, who were reduced at that stage to basketry, to labor-intensive and requiring a lot of skill, but their lifestyles were no longer possible the way they had lived and hunted and farmed patches of land for a few years and moved on when the land was exhausted. So these baskets are, to me, very important. You can see the decoration, the impressed decoration on them, these marks here done with potato or carrots, which they would dip in ink in different dyes and then impress on the baskets. And a number of them, notice the one down here, if you would, with more intricate decoration on it. And the legend, in fact, is quite interesting. This basket was made by one of a tribe of Indians that formerly lived in this vicinity. They owned several acres of land and a common in Mendon, where they spent spring and fall returning here, in brackets, Natick, for fall and winter. One of the last of the tribe was Patience Pease, who gave this basket to one of the old Dover residents, from whose family this basket was purchased. This basket is about 260 years old. Well, this label was typed probably about 40 years ago, so now it makes it about almost 300 years old. These baskets were some of the last objects made by the Native Americans who, of course, before metal was commonly available to them, this is a typical stone axe, which would have been hafted like that, and quite an efficient tool and weapon, though more labor-intensive to use than copper or steel tools. This is a view, a watercolor, a copy of an original done by Richard Vera, an architect who lived in Dover and was one of became one of its most respected historians. And he was a gifted artist, as you can see. And here's a view of Dover around 1900, with the town hall on the left and the Higgins store, which is still a grocery store here, the railway line running through it. We, at the moment, we're just out of the picture. We would be standing here somewhere. I mean, the Sawin Museum is about here. We can see, if we look out of the front door of the Sawin Museum, we can see the present town hall, which is not this one. That one burned down. This is a diorama showing the old town centre, and you can press different buttons, and this is the William King house, the Annie King blacksmith shop over there. So this is the heart of Dover. It was designed by the Dick Vera. And underneath it here is a trunk. This is a Chinese trunk of the early 19th century, which was found in the Carroll House. So it belonged to one of the descendants, probably, of the first parson, first minister of Dover. Now, the Carroll House is part of another project which I'm involved with since I came back on the Society, the Fisher Barn. And when we dismantled the barn in about 1998-99, next to the original barn there was an outhouse. And this outhouse was interesting because it had two holes in it, one for adults and one a toilet seat for children, all cut out of the same plank. With at the end of the plank there was a square opening about a foot square where presumably they would have kept the toilet paper or what was used traditionally, corn cobs, in those days. So part of what we plan to do starting in a few weeks' time, in fact, is to rebuild the outhouse next to the barn, on this side here of the barn, to build a lean-to over it and to put the original wooden frame, which had the two toilet seats with the storage box for toilet paper, put that back in place. This is the top floor then, with more display cases, as you can see, of artifacts, some going back to the colonial period, but many of them are more recent. And I'd like you to zero in on this display here of shoes. And they're all old and worn, and they were found in sort of a hidden cranny in the Carroll House where the parson lived. And they're obviously part of a tradition which doesn't seem to have many parallels, is not well known, but some female member of the family would throw a shoe in this cubby. It was behind the chimney, in fact, so it was only discovered when an electrician was doing some electrical work a few years ago. Interesting artifacts. So these cases have items which were the result of excavations in the town of Dover of different periods, 18th, 19th century. These were farmhouses, some of their ceramics. Pottery is very important to a historian and particularly the archaeologist because it's so long-lasting, even if broken and abandoned, it doesn't weather quickly, and when you find it you can reconstruct it. In fact, I like to point out in my classes when I teach the archaeology of ancient Near East, the earliest manufactured objects we have are pottery, really. When I say manufactured, made from materials which are mixed together and then fired. Of course, you can make stone tools. That goes back tens of thousands of years, but pottery was only invented about 7,000 years ago. And I've shown people pottery which is 7,000 years old, and it could have been made yesterday. It's stainless steel. Steel rusts after a time. Glass weathers. It peels like an onion. But pottery doesn't. It is very, very stable as a raw material. So we have 3 display cases here from the American Revolution in the middle, Civil War on the left, and World War I and II on the right. One of the early buildings in the village, which belonged to a family known as Draper, and were two boys, two young men, two brothers who lived there with their parents, and they heard the call to go and to join the American troops in Lexington, and they left their house. They stepped across the sill of their house that April morning to go and to join up to muster with their fellow soldiers in Lexington. So it's interesting. Dover supplied some of the Minutemen for the beginning of the fight against the British, the early days of the Revolution. I'd like to have a major display celebrating or honoring America's joining the forces or entrance into World War I in 2017, because it will be the 100th anniversary. We are now in the basement of the museum, and you can see it's rather a hodgepodge of objects, a cobbler's bench there in front of us. On this table, a range of household items, which they are set out in a definite order because some members of the society have school programs for the kids, and they come down here. And the display there, you can see in the corner the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts. Amelia Peabody lived, in fact she was our neighbour. Her house is just down the road from the Sawin Museum, and she came to settle in Dover before the Second World War, in the earlier years of the last century. She never married. She was a sculptress by profession, but was very involved in horses, in sulkies, in horse racing, and had extensive property, and after her death, gave a lot of it to the town of Dover. This is what the original plan for the museum. As you can see, it's slightly grander than what was actually built. At least double the size of what was actually built. But anyhow, that didn't happen. The funds were short. But still, it's still a nice building that we have.
My thanks to Stuart Swiny and everyone at the Dover Historical Society. The Sawin Museum is open during the summer months into fall, I believe. I'm sure there's somewhere you can look up that information. And it's located right in the center of Dover. So thanks for watching.